I grew up in a small rural town in Pennsylvania, surrounded by thick woods and vast fields. It was the kind of place where you knew everyone, and nothing ever really happened until it did. When I was 16, my family adopted a dog from a shelter. His name was Max, a black German shepherd with deep, almost human-like eyes. The shelter told us he had been found wandering near an abandoned house deep in the woods. No tags, no microchip. He was oddly quiet for a dog his size. No barking, no whining, just a silent observer. But he seemed well trained, so we took him home. At first, Max was a great pet. He followed me everywhere, sat by my feet, and slept at my bedroom door. But as time passed, I noticed strange things. He would stare at something invisible in the corners of the house, his ears twitching like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. Sometimes at night, I'd wake up to see him standing in my doorway, staring at me with those dark eyes. One night, my dad and I were watching TV when we heard scratching at the front door. Not just a normal dog scratch, it was frantic, like something was trying to claw its way inside. Max, who had been lying beside the couch, suddenly sat up and let out a low growl. We exchanged nervous glances. "Probably a raccoon," my dad muttered, grabbing a flashlight. He opened the door. The porch light flickered for a moment, and then we saw it. Long, deep scratches running down the wooden frame. But there was no animal. Nothing at all. The night was silent, too silent. Max stepped forward, his hackles raised. Then he did something he had never done before. He let out a deep, guttural bark, one that didn't sound like a dog at all. It was almost human. And that's when we saw the eyes. Two glowing, yellow eyes staring at us from the edge of the woods. For a moment, my dad and I stood frozen, staring at those glowing yellow eyes in the darkness. They were too high off the ground to belong to a normal animal. A coyote or even a deer's reflection would have made sense, but this was different. The eyes didn't blink. They didn't move. They just watched. Max stood at the door, his entire body tense, lips curled back into a snarl. I had never seen him act like this before, like he knew something we didn't. Then, without warning, Max lunged. He bolted past my dad, out the door, and straight toward the tree line. My dad barely had time to react before the porch light flickered again, this time going completely out. The entire house was swallowed by darkness. "Max!" I shouted, stepping forward, but my dad grabbed my arm. "Stay inside," he said, his voice unusually firm. He was a no-nonsense kind of man, and in that moment I could hear something in his tone. Fear. We stood there listening. At first there was nothing, just the rustling of leaves in the distance. Then we heard it, a deep, unnatural howl. It wasn't Max. It wasn't any animal I had ever heard. It was long, guttural, almost like a person trying to mimic a wolf, but getting it terribly wrong. Then came the sound of movement, leaves crunching, twigs snapping, and then silence. My dad cursed under his breath and grabbed the shotgun from the cabinet. I had never seen him this tense. He hesitated for a second, then slowly stepped outside. I followed, my heart pounding. Max was gone. But what was worse, there were footprints leading from the woods to our front door. Not paw prints, human footprints. And they were huge. The footprints in the dirt were massive, far larger than any normal person's. The toes were elongated, almost claw-like, and the steps were spaced unnaturally far apart, as if whatever had left them had been running on all fours before rising to walk. My dad's grip tightened around the shotgun. He stepped forward cautiously, his boots crunching on the gravel. I hesitated, but the sight of Max missing pulled me forward. "We need to find him," I whispered. Dad didn't answer right away. His eyes were locked on something in the distance at the edge of the tree line. I followed his gaze and my blood ran cold. There, partially hidden between the trees, was Max, but something was wrong. He was standing completely still, staring at us. His posture was stiff, unnatural, like he had been frozen mid-movement. His eyes, normally warm and alert, looked empty, lifeless. "Max," I called hesitantly. No reaction. Then, as if pulled by invisible strings, Max tilted his head to the side, far too much like a broken doll. A deep shiver ran down my spine. That was not normal. My dad took a slow step forward, but as soon as he did, Max moved. Not like a dog. He twitched, jerked, then stood up on his hind legs. I swear to God, I will never forget that image. His body was shaking, his front paws dangling unnaturally in front of him like they didn't belong. It was as if he was trying to mimic human posture, but failing horribly. My stomach twisted. This was wrong. Then, from deep within the woods, we heard something that made my dad raise his shotgun, a laugh. Not a normal laugh, not a human one. It was garbled, wet, almost struggling, like something was learning how to mimic human sounds but hadn't quite figured it out yet. Max's mouth opened, and that's when I realized the laugh was coming from him. I wanted to believe my mind was playing tricks on me, that the darkness, the fear, the adrenaline, maybe they were all distorting what I was seeing. But deep down, I knew this was real. Max was laughing, his mouth was open, but the sound didn't match. It wasn't a bark, it wasn't a growl. It was a human-like chuckle, warbled and broken like someone choking on their own voice. His body twitched unnaturally, his head still tilted at that sickening angle. "Max," I whispered, taking a hesitant step forward. Dad yanked me back so hard I nearly fell. "Get inside," he ordered, his voice low and tight. I had never seen my dad scared before. He was the kind of man who wasn't afraid of anything, storms, wild animals, even intruders. But now, as he stared at our dog standing upright in the woods, his hands were shaking. Max's body twitched again, then snapped forward like he was about to lunge. My dad fired the shotgun. The blast echoed through the trees, shattering the silence. Max let out a sharp, high-pitched shriek, not a dog's yelp, but something wrong, something that sent ice through my veins. It sounded like multiple voices layered on top of each other, distorted and inhuman. Then he ran. Not on 4 legs, on 2. I couldn't breathe. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. Max sprinted deeper into the woods, his movements jerky, unnatural, as if something inside him was struggling to control his body. Then, just before he vanished into the trees, he stopped, turned, and smiled. Not a dog's expression, a human grin. Then, he was gone. Silence. My dad grabbed my arm and pulled me inside, locking the door behind us. "We're leaving," he muttered. "Tomorrow, first thing in the morning." But Max, that wasn't Max. His voice was hoarse, like he was trying to convince himself just as much as me. That night, we didn't sleep. We sat in the living room, the shotgun loaded, every light in the house turned on, but no more scratching came, no laughter, no yellow eyes in the woods. By dawn, we packed our things and left. We never saw Max again. But sometimes at night, I have dreams. Dreams where I wake up to scratching at my bedroom door. Dreams where I hear a garbled, choking laugh. Dreams where I see my dog, standing on 2 legs, smiling.